Distinguished Mr. President, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Ukraine, I sincerely congratulate Honorable Mr. Peter Thompson on his election as the President of the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly. I pledge Ukraine's full support for all of your endeavors, and in one of the worst years of the 20th century, Ernest Hemingway wrote an inspiring humanistic Every man is a piece of the continent. A part of the main, any man's death diminished me because I am involved in the mankind. These words embodied the essence of the moral and historical transformation of the humanity underwent in the wake of the two world wars of the 20th century. We entered to the third millennium with a strong sense of the being united as a new humankind for which there is no such things like someone else's pain. What has happened to this feeling? Where has it gone? Where has the drive to isolate oneself on the island come from? Why is that new politician come to the power on various continents calling to ignore someone else's pain? Why is that cynicism not seen since the times of Hemingway novel has settled down in our lives under the guise of so-called pragmatism? What does make evil so strong and good so weak nowadays? No man is an island. This is also about those in power. This is also about our organization. Mr. President, in these days, the world has been driven to more and more instability. Some have been affected more, some less. But never since the end of the Cold War have the international norms and principles been unilaterally defied on such a scale and with such a brutality. The Charter of the United Nations, the document underpinning our responsibility for maintaining the world order, has never been questioned. And never has a Security Council member been a major violator of the United Nations Charter while being at the same time the instigator of and active participant in a conflict as well as its mediator. As a result, global instability is no longer a subject of the academic debates. This is actually the biggest threat facing humanity nowadays. And our future, the future of our children and our organization depend directly on how we manage to overcome this threat. I see only two ways out of this situation. Either we recognize the problem and spare no effort to address it on the basis of shared values and principles, or to deceive ourselves in the illusion of stability, turn a blind eye to the obvious fact and leave the future of the United Nations, this unique platform for common action, at the mercy of one player who blatantly violates United Nations Charter. In the latter case, we will shortly face severe disappointment. The price for this would be a short-sightedness has long been known, and the price would be the human lives. In the last century, humanity paid enormous price following two world wars, about 70 million lives. Isn't it enough? Hence, I wish to reiterate, we can no longer afford the Security Council deadlocked on the key issue of the international peace and security. Limiting the use of the veto power in the decision-making on conflict prevention and resolution should become a priority task within our Security Council reform. the suspension of the use of the veto in cases of the mass atrocities, as well as in cases when United Nations Security Council member state is a party to a dispute, should become a rock-solid rule without exceptions. The Council must become a truly democratic and representative body free from relics of the past. There is a critical need to make our organization capable of addressing effectively acts of aggression and bring those responsible to justice. Otherwise, no nation, no UN member state can enjoy sustainable security and development. Another threat to the international peace and security that requires urgent attention of the world community is a hybrid wars. As a president of the state, which has become a testing ground for the new methods of the hybrid warfare, I already drew international attention to this threat at the last session of the General Assembly. Over the past year, the practice of the hybrid warfare has only spread. Its effect has been seen in whole Europe, America, and beyond. Political pressure, blatant propaganda, interference with the electoral process, economic cohesion, secret subversive and military operation, cyber attack, misuse of diplomatic measures. These are modern unconventional methods of the undeclared war. It is a time for the Security Council to go resolutely and effectively in this issue. Ukraine is ready to further discussion on what and how the Council can do to tackle this threat. In view of the recent development of the Korean Peninsula, the future of the nuclear non-proliferation regime is a cause of the increased concern of my country. As you well know, Ukraine voluntarily dismantled its own nuclear arsenal, the third largest in the world at the time, with from 2,800 to 4,200 tactical nuclear warheads in exchange for security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity assurance under the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. Regretfully, all these assurances remain just a piece of paper. Let's be frank, we failed to pass exam with the Budapest Memorandum. Then democratic world lost its first battle. It was not only about Ukraine, but also about credibility of all the agreement. However, Ukraine, as a responsible international actor, has always been and remain a committed advocate of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Thus, timely and effective action of the international community, the Security Council in the first place, in response to the North Korean nuclear test, is one more example for all of us. We must not allow plunging the world into the new nuclear arms race. Huge global instability and ever-growing security challenges increasingly demand strong leadership both in the state and in the international organization. The United Nations is no exception. This year, we will appoint the next United Nations Secretary General. And I believe that the candidate for this important position, in addition to his or her highly professional skills, must be, first, uncompromised on respect for the UN Charter. Second, ready to use decisively all tools at his or her disposal, including those provided under Article 99 of the United Nations Charter, in case of a threat to peace and security. We expect that both Security Council and the General Assembly will make a right choice. Ukraine, as a current non-permanent member of the Security Council, will work consistently to the end. Mr. President, this year we have witnessed a gruesome series of the terrorist attacks. Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Burkina Faso, Turkey, Belgium, France, Germany, Ukraine. And this is the list, unfortunately, is not complete. The tentacles of terrorism are wrapping in more countries and continents. And it is obvious that such a large-scale threat can be confronted effectively only through the joint efforts. In this context, protection of crucial infrastructure from the terrorist attack should become our joint endeavor. Banking and finance, telecommunication, emergency services, air and railway transportation, energy and water supply, all will be put at risk. Even worse, they can result in numerous victims among the civilian population. We will continue calling for the Council's action in response to this growing problem. In this regard, we welcome the initiative of the United Kingdom to convene a Security Council ministerial meeting to discuss the terrorist threat on the aviation security. This should become a powerful signal that the Council is ready to act resolutely to prevent future tragedies. Tragedies like the downing by the terrorists of the Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 over the Donbass 2 years ago. The scrupulous technical investigation carried out by an international team made it possible not only to uncover details, but also to put together the whole picture of the horrible crime. Now we have to ensure the proper implementation of the Security Council Resolution 2166, regardless of Russia's shameful veto on the decision to establish international tribunal under the United Nations aegis. The joint team composed of Malaysia, Netherlands, Australia, Belgium, and Ukraine continues the criminal investigation. And we must set up efficient mechanisms to bring to justice all those responsible for this catastrophe. Our moral duty is to ensure that not only perpetrators, but also masterminds, this is the crime who orders killed 298 innocent people, it should be punished accordingly to what they did. Dear Mr. President, since year 2014, Ukraine has learned from its own tragic experience what is foreign gross terrorism feel like. The terrorist component of the undeclared hybrid war that Russia waged against Ukraine is evident. Dramatically, it has become a daily routine in the occupied areas of Donetsk and Lugansk region of Ukraine. For over 2 years of this tragedy, Ukraine received an extensive and irrefutable evidence, a direct involvement of Russia, its state agencies and officials in financing, sponsorship, and coordination of the terrorist group, which have committed the countless crimes against my compatriots. The shocking reality is that there is a roughly 38,000 strong illegal military force in Donbass, and its large part is irregular and mercenaries from Russia. This force is armed to the teeth by Russia. This is not exaggeration. They have at their disposal about 700 tanks, 1,200 armored vehicles, more than 1,000 artillery systems, and more than 300 multiple launch rocket systems. Russia continues and keeps sending weapons, ammunition, and manpower to Ukraine through the uncontrolled part of Ukrainian-Russian border, sending by roads and by rail on a daily basis. At the same time, Russian side continues insisting to all forums, including here in UN, that it has nothing to do with all of this and that the Russians are not there in Ukraine. In Russian, they called "их там нет." No, they are there. And even hypocrite Soviet leader could hardly compete with the outright lies of the manipulation deployed by the Kremlin today. Yes, They used to threaten the world with the using of nuclear weapons, just like Russia is doing now. However, when shown the US intelligence aerial photo, even Khrushchev could not but recognize that the Soviet missiles were stationed in Cuba. Today, in response of thousands of the available photo, video, satellite images, eyewitness and other evidence of Russian military presence in Donbass, Russia only goes over and over again with a cynical recitation. We are not there. Их там нет. Russia used to say the same about Crimea. Их там нет. We are not there. And then a sham referendum was conducted at the Russian gunpoints. And a few days ago, the contradictory statement by Russian president that Crimea, can you imagine, was annexed in accordance with the United Nations Charter. Do we really refer to the same charter? This is not merely disrespect for the centuries-long principle of the international relation, written and unwritten, legal and ethical rules. This is downgrading the diplomacy as such. And I believe it's the time for our organization to work out serious safeguards against abuses of trust of the world community by some United Nations member states. It is necessary to elaborate mechanisms how to officially document evidence of the aggression of one country against another and to envisage clear responsibility for the aggressor in light with the UN Charter principles. It is the third year the aggression against my country continues, bringing pain and suffering to the Ukrainian people. 2,000 people, more than 2,000, 2,430 were killed. Significant part over the past year. The total death toll this year is the heart of Europe infected and has amounted up to the 2,500 military persons and 7,500 civilians. Altogether, 10,000 people. Hundreds of hostages remain unlawful captivity in Donbass and in Russia. I was shocked to know that recently Russia backed illegal armed formation in the occupied area of Donbass took children as hostages. They showed the video of the interrogation of the teenagers who they absolutely accuse of conspiring and carrying out subversive operations. This behavior is out of the place in the 21st century. And we call UNICEF to intervene and to prevent abuses and torture of these children. Another heartbreaking story. A few days ago, one Ukrainian hostage volunteer, Vladimir Zhemchugov, was eventually set free. After 1 year in a captivity without proper medical assistance, this completely blind man without hands said the words which are quintessence of what is happening in Donbass. I quote, "I am native of Donbass. I am ethnic Russian, a former miner. But people like me in Donbass, patriot of Ukraine, were not fooled by Russian propaganda. We started to resist Russian occupation, to resist the country that set off the war against Ukraine. However, he expressed strong belief that the soon peace will be restored in his native land on Donbass and the people will return to the normal life. In this regard, I would like to emphasize once and again, Ukraine remains committed to the settlement of the situation in Donbass by political and diplomatic means. We are a peaceful nation. It was never, under any circumstances, our intention to start any conflict with our neighbor. Over the past year, we have consistently demonstrated, indeed, that we are ready to move forward on the implementation of Minsk Agreement and comprehensive peace plan agreed in September 2014 and confirmed in February 2015. Yet we have constantly faced resistance of the Kremlin and its proxy, who do their best to delay peace process and to shift responsibility for their own destructive action onto Ukraine. We rely that Russia will abandon this approach to give a chance to the comprehensive settlement. Let me stress again, the Minsk document entails, by and large, clear guidelines for each side and what must be done. Ukraine has done a lot and will continue doing its part. Now, it is a time for Russia and its proxy in the Ukrainian Donbass to start implementing their part. Set the captives free, stop shooting, withdraw weapons, let the OEC inspector carry out its mandate and watch over the Ukrainian-Russian border without any objection, any stopping withdrawal Russian weaponry, as well as the regular and irregular military units. The occupying state does not limit itself to the combat action on Donbass only. It also carries of its repressive policy in Crimea. Once thriving and free now, Crimean Peninsula has become a gray zone where people are effectively deprived for all protection. The judicial and penitentiary system in Crimea have been converted by Russia into the tool of repression. As has been already the case so many times in history, most of the victims are Crimean Tatar and Ukrainian. The latest stroke for this picture is the ban by the Russian occupation authority on the activities of the Mejlis, a self-governing body of the Crimean Tatar people. And to this, the arbitrary detention of Ilmi Umerov, deputy head of the Mejlis, in psychiatric facilities for 20 days. In fact, the outrageous practice of punitive psychiatry, which had been widely used by the Soviet repressive machinery, and now is back in service for Russia. We urge Russia to grant unimpeded access of international human rights organizations both in Crimea and in Donbass, and implement the decision of UNESCO Executive Board on establishing monitoring in Crimea at the institutional level. The residents of the peninsula must be protected from discrimination and repression. The genocide of the Crimean Tatar people, who already experienced the tragedy of forced deportation 70 years ago, must not repeat. In Ukraine, we highly appreciate the contribution of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Human Rights and UN Human Rights Council to addressing the current human rights situation in my country, including the occupied Crimea. This year, we intend to bring the matter to the attention of the United Nations General Assembly and submit the respective draft resolution on the human rights situation in the territory of the occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea and city of Sevastopol. This resolution shall become an impartial assessment of the human rights situation in the occupied territory by the entire United Nations family. People in these territories have the right to be protected. Their children have a right to be protected. And it is our responsibility as United Nations to protect them. And I appeal to all United Nations member states to support the initiative of Ukraine. And we also urge you not to recognize the legitimacy of the Russian election, which were held a few days ago in the occupied Crimea. If you do recognize them, this will play into the hands of the aggressor and encourage further repression. One more problem which emanates from Russia's occupation of Crimea is its intention to deploy tactical nuclear weapons and means of its delivery on the occupied peninsula. This would destroy the global system of non-proliferation weapons of mass destruction and brutally violate Ukraine's non-nuclear status. Moreover, Russia uses a temporarily occupied Crimea for protecting its aggressive policy not only in Ukraine, but also in other corners of the world, including in Syria, where this policy goes hand in hand with the war crimes and crimes against humanity. Today, the entire democratic world is deeply concerned with the human rights violation and dire suffering of the civilian population in Syria. And I believe that the full implementation of the 2012 Geneva Communiqué and the Security Council Resolution 2254 is vital for the settlement of this protracted and bloody conflict. We draw particular attention to the need of remove the threat to use of chemical weapons in this country. And our urgent priority is to improve the humanitarian situation and ensure access to the international humanitarian organization to Aleppo and other cities in need. We welcome special meeting of the United Nations Security Council on Syria this morning, where I had an opportunity to express our view on this important issue. And I hope that this discussion will lead to the meaningful decision and tangible steps toward the plight of the Syrian, bring it to the peace. Africa is yet another continent which continues to suffer from numerous unresolved conflicts and required our particular attention. And it should finally be seen that as you actually is, as a continent with untapped potential and opportunity for the rest of the world, rather than as a burden as it used to be many decades after the centuries of the colonialism and exploitation. And my country will spare no efforts to support the African continent, and our African partners can fully count on Ukraine, including within the Security Council. Mr. President, despite the ongoing challenges facing Ukraine, my country is fully committed to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals which were adopted by United Nations General Assembly last year. We keep on working, fulfilled our commitment under the Sustainable Development Goals at the national level, in particular those related to ensuring healthy environment and sustainable energy supply, promoted gender equality and fighting corruption. As a member of the Friend of Climate Change group, Ukraine has contributed to the reaching consensus, a universal agreement on climate changes. We have completed ratification procedure related to the Paris Agreement in a very short period of time and deposit our instrument of ratification during today's high-level event. This year, we have also reached an important landmark, the completion of the UN Action Plan on Chernobyl, as well as decade of recovery and sustainable development of the affected regions. However, there is a clear need for continued international effort to mitigate the impact of the disaster on Chernobyl nuclear power plant, as well as the complete of the respective project. And I am pleased to note that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development addressed one of the biggest current problems, migration. In the recent years, we have witnessed unprecedented mass movement of the refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, and internally displaced persons. It is hard to imagine, but today there are roughly 65 million forcibly displaced persons all over the world, including 21 million refugees, 3 million asylum seekers, and over 41 million internally displaced persons. Unfortunately, above number of IDP included some of 1,800,000 internally displaced persons of my compatriots with flat Donbass occupied and devastated by Russia. No doubt, our main responsibility is to save life of the people and to ensure protection those who need it. However, to respond to this global challenge in a comprehensive manner, we must address the root causes of the phenomenon. They include first and foremost armed conflict, terrorism, sectarianism, and poverty. The New York Declaration we just adopted is the first step in this direction, and my government is committed to protecting the IDPs and has undertaken crucial measures to strengthen the national response mechanism. Particular attention has been paid to ensuring means of living IDP, as well as improving access to the healthcare, education, housing, and employment. Mr. President, 70 years ago, one of the founding fathers of the United Nations, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, said at the Westminster College, our difficulties and dangers will not be removed by closing our eyes to them. They will not be removed by mere waiting to see what happened. No, will not be removed by the policy of the appeasement. These words have not lost their relevance today either. Churchill's vision of the United Nations as vital sign of peace, as an essential policy of foundation international relations that must confront the two giant marauders, war and tyranny, requires the new reading of our time. He called the adhere faithfully to the Charter of the United Nations and walk forward to a sedate and sober strength-seeking, no one land treasure-seeking, to lay no arbitrary control upon thousands of men. I trust that this very approach remains a powerful guide for all of us. Moreover, it is the only possible way to preserve our unique organization and to prevent the world from disaster of a new global catastrophe. I thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Mr. President.